Hello and welcome to Hermetic Journeys. John D at your service, and I'm here to lend some sophistication and culture to the ridiculous introductions to which you've been subjected. Far be it from me to even consider myself as part of this imbecilic venture. But I have a secret. Come closer. Closer. Where is your mask? Oh, never mind. You see, I don't want that Tony G fellow to know that I'm giving it all away, although he's so wrapped up in his little world of Atalanta foolishness that he would never understand. Back to my secret. I'm here to inform you that I am the mystery guest of which you will certainly be appraised, but Tony G is so completely unaware that I'm stealing his thunder, so to speak. So now you know. The secret is out, and that cretin will never know that you know that I know that he doesn't know. I suppose I'm burdened with the responsibility of introducing emblem number 8 of Atalanta Fugiens. What does the silly man say at this juncture? Oh yes, let's look at the emblem. Oh, really? Hello and welcome to Hermetic Journeys. Today we're going to take a look at emblem number 8. Pretty cool emblem. And a little later, I'm going to introduce to you our mystery guest for this video. And let me tell you something, he's a really cool guy. But we have a lot of work to get through. So let's get right to it. Let's take a look at the emblem. In the emblem, at its center, we have a rather large egg. And Michael Maier tells us this egg is from a bird called the coruscant. And it looks like it's been taken out of that fire on the left there, so it looks like it's pretty hot. And standing above it is our old friend, the gentleman in Roman garb who appears throughout Atalanta Fugiens. We have no idea who he is. Maybe he's Ovid, the guy who wrote Metamorphosis, and on which Atalanta Fugiens is based. Who knows? And he's about to hit it with a sword, is what it looks like, right? So let's see what the motto says and if it sheds any light on this particular image. The motto says, "Take the egg and pierce it with a fiery sword." Thank you, Captain Obvious. Oh, sorry, man. Well, you know, look, if Michael Maier was forthcoming about everything, and let's face it, no system worth its salt lays all its cards on the table, but if he was forthcoming about this stuff, I wouldn't be doing these videos. It wouldn't be so much fun. I mean, these were things that people got together and tried to figure out in their parlors, right, with their friends, these emblem books. In any case, so of course, what I did was resort to my tried and true new method, looking at Michael Maier's sources. And this motto, that is, comes from an older work entitled Artis Auriferae by Pietro Perna and published in 1572. Sorry about that. It's a 2-volume set, and it was a collection of alchemical works from different people. Now, the original motto gives us a lot more of a clue as to what's going on here, and it really reveals what Michael Maier is trying to tell us here. So the original model says, take the egg, that is the retort, heat it, pierce it with a sword. Ah, now we're getting somewhere. Well, what the hell's a retort? Well, a retort it's glassware used in chemistry. It's used primarily in the distillation process, all right? So it really doesn't look like an egg. So I'm going to refer to it as a flask, because a flask looks more like an egg than a retort, for what it's worth. Specifically, I want to address a particular image from a book called Splendor Solis, which was published in 1582. There was an earlier version in 1532, published by a man named Solomon Trismosin, and of course we don't even know if he exists at this point in time. Scholars are scratching their heads about this. In any case, a beautifully illustrated book. In fact, I would call it what was known as an illuminated book. There's these beautiful paintings of each of the emblems. And in fact, if you want to get yourself a beautiful copy of it, this is the work to get. And I'm not getting any kickbacks here or anything. This is just an incredible book. The scholarship here, some wonderful essays by these amazing scholars, not like this goofball scholar. In any case, here we have the image is reproduced, and it's just a beautiful version of it. And of course, there's explanations as to what they mean
and that kind of thing. So as you can see, these are absolutely lovely. And I just love this book. It's a wonderful book. In any case, we can see here the alchemical flask, and if you'll note, the top of the flask is melted, all right? It's sealed, and that's where the term hermetically sealed come from. It's sealing the flask so that the vapors don't escape. It's so similar to an egg, okay, that alchemists refer to it as a philosophical egg, right? Get it? So whatever goes on within the flask is just like what's going on within the egg. In previous videos, we looked at Robert Allen Bartlett's book, Real Alchemy, which is just a great book. As you know, I always talk about it because it's just a great book. And I don't get kickbacks for this either. In any case, and he talks about that particular method to create the Philosopher's Stone, and there are many, of course, where animated mercury, and it's animated through the use of star regulus of antimony, is added to gold powder, creates an amalgam, puts it in a flask, and hermetically seals the flask, okay? So we see the same thing happening here in this particular image from Splendor Solis. The flask is hermetically sealed. Now that process took 19 months, and the heat was gradually increased over time. It started at 275 degrees Fahrenheit, ended up being somewhere around 400 degrees Fahrenheit. And interestingly enough, within that 19-month period, one would witness the black phase, the peacock phase, the white phase, and the red phase within the flask. And how much is that like an egg, right? So you have a gestation period. At the end, the chick breaks open the egg, and we've got a beautiful little chick. In terms of the alchemical experiment, we have to break open the flask, and that's exactly what the guy with the sword is doing. He's standing over it. He's going to break the flask open. But the sword also represents the heat, the intense heat. There's one excerpt from the discourse I'd like to read to you, so this way we get an even clearer picture of what's going on within the philosophical egg, okay? It says here, the philosophers do burn their egg with fire, not to mortify and destroy it, but that it may receive life and growth. For when a chicken is from thence produced, animated and living, it cannot be said to be the corruption, but generation of it. It ceases indeed to be an egg by the privation of the oval form, and begins to be an animal with 2 feet and volatile by the introduction of a more noble form. In the egg are the seeds of both male and female joined together under one cover or shell. So he's saying within the egg, within the philosophical egg, we have both masculine and feminine energies, okay? Remember, the mercury in that experiment was representative of the feminine energies, and the gold, of course, was representative of the masculine. And combined as an amalgam, we have the rebus. We talked about the rebus several times. It comes as the concatenation of a Latin term, res bina, meaning 2 things. So the rebus, again, is the perfect combination of masculine and feminine energies. And we see in this particular image from alchemical work by Heinrich Nollius, published in 1617. You see the rebus in the center here, all right, surrounded by planetary symbols. He is encased within the philosophical egg. Pretty cool, huh? Ultimately, you have to break open that flask to get the Philosopher's Stone, because that's what's happening here, right? And let's face it, you can't make an omelet without breaking some eggs. Now, I'd like to talk about one other example of how the philosophical egg was used in terms of the creation of the universe, okay? Remember that really cool thundery cloud that I have? Oh, there it is. Kind of spooky. We talked about the prima materia. Well, in some alchemical texts that I've read, the egg also represents the universe before its creation. In other words, the philosophical egg contained the prima materia. And then God said, let there be light, and the universe came about and formed that prima materia into what we have today. The prima materia being material, matter, and energy that was unformed, potential energy, all that kind of stuff. So that's what we're talking about. That's the other example. And now we'd like to go to the next section, where I will introduce our spectacular mystery guest, one of my favorite people from this particular time. Just love the guy. In any case, stay tuned. Okay, here we are. part 2 of this video. Thank you so much for continuing to watch. So now I'm going to introduce our super deluxe mystery guest. All right, he is one of my favorite people from the 1600s, that time period. Certainly a seeker of truth. His name is Dr. John Dee. So who was John Dee? Well, John Dee was a polymath, a mathematical prodigy. Right? He was born July 13th, 1527, and he died around 1608, 1609. Not really sure when he passed away. But anyway, polymath. And so he studied math in college. He met Mercator. Mercator, he formed this wonderful friendship, and that inspired John Dee to work with navigators. And certainly there's a lot of mathematics involved in that. And he helped navigators make their way to the New Atlantis, as Francis Bacon calls it, or America. Okay? So in addition to that, he became the Queen's court astrologer, Queen Elizabeth I, that is. And I hope you like Queen Elizabeth. You know what? I don't care if you like her. I love Queen Elizabeth. But anyway, he became her court astrologer. And what's really cool is that she chose him to pick her coronation date based on the astrology. Okay? Now, astrology and astronomy were not two separated entities, all right, in the 15 and 1600s. They were together. It was one science taught in university. So John Dee studied astronomy and mathematics, so as a result, he was also studying astrology. So he consulted his astrological charts based on Queen Elizabeth's birth time and all that stuff, and he picked her coronation date, which I believe was January 15th, 1559. He also coined the term British Empire, and he convinced Queen Elizabeth to go out and build an empire in the name of Britain. He was very proud of being English, British, okay? And he coined the term British Empire. Only his idea was to kind of like the Federation of Planets, okay, in Star Trek, Star Trek fans, okay? But it didn't turn out that way, unfortunately, as very few things do. But most of the stuff that he did, most of his time was spent speaking with angels, okay? Okay, as odd as that sounds, he hired what was called at the time a scryer. Well, a scryer would be equivalent to today's psychic medium, okay? One of the scryers that he hired, and he ended up spending 12 years doing this with, was a man named Edward Kelly. Edward Kelly, before he met John Dee, was kind of this nefarious individual. In actuality, he had his ears lopped off. His ears lopped off for making fake coins, counterfeiting, okay? And that was the punishment. So in this particular image of Edward Kelly, you see his hair is kind of forward on his face because he doesn't have ears. For 12 years, he and Edward Kelly spoke with angels. And the way they did it was through something called a scrying mirror, okay? And Edward Kelly was what they called a scryer. So a scrying mirror, and here's an image of one from the British Museum, is a piece of polished volcanic glass, almost mirror-like, okay? That usually was brought over from Mesoamerica, because the Mayan people believed that mirrors were portals to another universe or another world. And we're not going to get into that right now. Still talking about John Dee, right? So anyway, he and Edward Kelly did this for 12 years. And this wonderful 3-volume set that my brother got for me lays out the entire process. John Dee kept meticulous notes in his journals concerning this particular work that he and Edward Kelly did. And it's absolutely fascinating. Whether you believe they were talking to angels or not doesn't even matter, because reading these wonderful volumes gives you some insight into how people thought in those days. Now, John Dee was a very deeply religious and faithful man, okay? Unfortunately, because he was a mathematician, math was somehow affiliated with conjuring, because calculating and conjuring are really, really close, and people actually look down on mathematics as a work of the devil, okay? I know that's really, really weird, but that's how it was. So John Dee, unfortunately, for most of his life, was accused of witchcraft and sorcery, but he was not. He was actually a very faithful man. If you look at his journals, you'll see a lot of his work a lot of his commentaries are prayers to Jesus Christ and to God the Father and all that wonderful stuff. Unfortunately, Dee really kind of paid the price for that reputation, which was really unfounded because he was not a magician or a conjurer, all right? So why am I talking about John Dee when we're talking about the philosophical egg? I bet you're asking yourself that. Why am I watching this video? Okay, I'm sorry. But actually, the reason I'm talking about John Dee was because he created something called the Hieroglyphic Monad, right? The Hieroglyphic Monad was a collection of symbols. And we see these symbols coming together and representing one complete key symbol, the Hieroglyphic Monad. Now, simple orientation of the Hieroglyphic Monad produced all of the 7 planetary symbols that were encoded into its essential matrix and much more. Dee wrote this when he was about 37 years old, okay? It was published in 1564, and he wrote it in 12 days in what he calls a mystical state. And he literally says here, I am the pen merely of God, whose spirit, quickly writing these things through me, I wish and I hope to be. So Dee also claimed that his hieroglyphic monad would revolutionize astronomy, alchemy, mathematics, linguistics, mechanics, music, optics, magic, and adeptship. And all of these things are encoded in the hieroglyphic monad. And you could write, there are hundreds of books written about this symbol alone. It's so deep and so reverent. I certainly don't have time to go into it. And unfortunately, I don't truly understand it. I do understand little pieces of it, okay? So this is the Hieroglyphic Monad, okay? It's a very thin book. In fact, half of this book is actually commentary. So it's only a few pages that Dee is writing about. But the problem is, what's missing from this book is John Dee. Because what John Dee did was he went to Maximilian, who was the Holy Roman Emperor at the time, and presented it to him, all right? But these were sort of his notes, and he expounded upon these things. And without John Dee's information, without him standing there expounding upon this to us, it doesn't do us much good, all right? So lots of stuff has been written about this particular work, lots of books and things and articles, and it's just fascinating. It's just an incredibly fascinating thing. He also shared this particular book with Queen Elizabeth I. She became kind of his buddy, all right? And I think she really admired John Dee. And of course, he admired the Queen. He was always there to help the Queen when she needed help. So here's the frontispiece, or the cover, for the Hieroglyphic Monad. And then you can see the Hieroglyphic Monad contained within an egg. Right, that's why we're going here with this. That's why I gave you that whole background on John Dee. First of all, because I like to talk about him, because he's a fascinating guy. And secondly, to help you understand what's going on with the Hieroglyphic Monad. Now, what I really love is at the very top of this image, it says in Latin, who does not understand should either learn or be silent. So in other words, shut up and listen. Because he's got a lot to say. He's not kidding around, all right? So, what I want to show you specifically from the Hieroglyphic Monad pertaining to the alchemical egg is this particular diagram, all right? And here you can see all of the planetary symbols, but as you can see, they're separated, all right? They're not combined into the Hieroglyphic Monad, but they're within this egg. And actually, there's a little yolk there as well. You can see the yolk. So we have at the top, we have Jupiter and Saturn. Saturn at the top, Jupiter below that. Then we have Mars heading all the way down, the Sun, all right, Venus, and then Mercury and the Moon. And John Dee says of this particular illustration, I'm going to read this to you. Here you will note that the miserable alchemists must learn to recognize their numerous errors and to understand what is the water of the white of egg, what is the oil of the yolk of egg, and what we mean by calcined eggshells. So what does he mean by that? Well, if you've kind of been focused on what we've been doing here, studying and trying to figure out, in my mind, and I am not an expert in these things, but this is what occurred to me. The white water represents Mercury. Now, in many alchemical texts that I've read, water or white, anything pertaining to that sometimes refers to Mercury. Now, the oil of the yolk
anytime you hear the word oil, we automatically think of sulfur, right? Because when alchemists worked with metals or with plants, extracting the oil of the plant was a critical piece, right? It's the soul of it. So now we've got mercury and we've got oil, right? We got sulfur. So then the third thing were the calcined eggshell. Well, what is that? That's the salt. When you calcine something, it becomes the salt. So we have the white, which is the mercury, the yellow, which is the sulfur, and the eggshell, which is the salt. So in my mind, the separated planetary symbols you see in this image, similar thing going on here. Once these symbols have their gestation period within the philosophical egg, when the egg is broken, right, by the fiery sword, okay, we have the hieroglyphic monad. In my opinion, the hieroglyphic monad is John Dee's Philosopher's Stone. That's why I introduced this section to you, and I hope you enjoyed it, because I love John Dee. As you can tell, I'm really excited. I just love talking about him. He's just a fascinating guy. In any case, I hope you enjoyed this. Let's get on to the music part of this section. Hello and welcome back. It's nice to see you again. Now we're going to listen to the music to Emblem 8. I downloaded the MIDI files from Adam McLean's wonderful alchemy website and imported them into my music software and assigned different instrumentation to them for your listening pleasure. The visuals that go along with it are going to be taken from that wonderful book, Splendor Solis. The reason I'm including them is for the larger part of these visuals, as you'll see, involve the alchemical egg or the flask and what goes on in the flask over the course of time. I think you'll enjoy it. In any case, please enjoy the music to Emblem 8 and the wonderful graphics from Splendor Solis. Hello and welcome back. I hope you enjoyed the wonderful music to Emblem 8 and the extraordinary artwork of Splendor Solis. The book belongs in a museum, don't you think? Like the Met right over here in Manhattan, that'd be great. Okay, before I go, I'd like to mention one more thing. Recently, we lost a fabulous talent, wonderful actor, Sir Sean Connery. Now, of the many roles he played, and he played many, and he played them all so well, he's probably best known for James Bond, Agent 007. Now, the author of James Bond, that's James Bond books, the original novels, is a guy named Ian Fleming. Now, interestingly, he never revealed where he got the nomenclature 007, but he did reveal where he got the name James Bond. James Bond, apparently, was the author of a book on birds of the Caribbean, and Ian Fleming was a bird watcher. So he took the name James Bond from a bird watcher. So the Secret Agent 007, James Bond, License to Kill, was named after a bird watcher. Truth is stranger than fiction, don't you think? So I'm going to get to the point now, I promise. Why am I talking about this? Well, because he never gave us the reason or the rationale behind the nomenclature 007. Some people say that
He was a historian concerning World War I and was very into the ciphering of German codes and deciphering of German codes, that is. And apparently one of the main codes that they broke was 0070. And some people say that's where he got 007 from. But there's an even more interesting story, in my opinion, and it's the one that I believe. In John Dee's correspondence with Queen Elizabeth, many times he would have to encode his letters to her. Queen Elizabeth was in trouble with a lot of people. A lot of people want to see her ousted or worse, executed. So she had spies out there, trying to stop any kind of threat against her, and there were many. Of course, we know John Dee was a confidant of Queen Elizabeth I. So he would write these encrypted letters to her and he would sign them 007. The two zeros designated that the letter was for the Queen's eyes only. The 7, of course, was a mystical number because John Dee was a polymath. So I choose to believe this story, that John Dee, not James Bond, was the original 007. Love it. Well, thank you for putting up with me. To those of you who have been watching from the very beginning, I thank you from the bottom of my heart. You guys are awesome because I love doing these videos. It's so much fun. And to new subscribers, welcome, welcome, welcome to this wacky thing that I do. We're going to have a lot of fun. We have 50 emblems to cover, so we got a ways to go. The next one is emblem number 9. And I guess I'll see you then. Until then, be safe and be well. Have a great day.